Hi, I'm Chris, horror filmmaker and fanatic, here to explain why Stranger Things Season 4 is both great and frustrating. Today I'm going to give a full spoiler review and analysis of Season 4 of Stranger Things, and by extension, my overall opinions of the entire show. In order to organize my chaotic ramblings and thoughts about the show, I'm going to try and organize this into three key categories of notes that I have of the show. First, I will start with something that I found great about Season 4, then I will talk about something that I found frustrating, alternate back and forth until I reach the four final opportunities that I think the show has in order to implement into Season 5 and finish the show off strong. But before we get into Season 4, let me give you a quick background as to my experience with the show. I watched Season 1 back when it first came out, when everyone in the world was saying about Stranger Things, a new Netflix show, it's huge, it's 80s nostalgia, it's kids, it's fun, and scary as well, and I was like, okay, sure, and I watched it, and I liked it. I didn't love it, I didn't find it like, well, that was like the greatest show I've ever seen, but I still liked it overall, and there was really nothing that stood out as like disappointing or annoying to me, and I just liked it. With Season 2, I watched that when it first came out, and I thought it was kind of slow and boring at first, and I wasn't quite sure if the show would actually be able to sustain a second season, but then when the plot kicked into high gear in the second half, I actually enjoyed it a good amount, and I've rewatched that season a couple times, and each time I'm like, okay, all right, it's maybe a little bit less than Season 1, but I think it reaches slightly higher highs than Season 1, but lower lows. So if Season 1 was here, then Season 2 is here. So that gradient of enjoyment and non-enjoyment is just growing. Then Season 3 came out, 4th of July 2019. I watched that season as well, and my expectations were kind of in the middle at this point. I was like, all right, I mean, I like Stranger Things, I'll watch it, sure. And I remembered the first time I watched Season 3, I had a good time. I thought, okay, this is probably my favorite season. I was enjoying it, and there was like one scene in the finale that really pissed me off. I hated the whole singing scene with the never-ending story. I thought that was really cringy. But then also, just the more I kind of thought about the season, and especially the way they handled Hopper and all of that, the more I was like thinking, wait, did I actually really like that season? And then I finally rewatched that season before Season 4, and I didn't really enjoy it a whole lot. I found a lot of the similar problems I had with Season 2 were worse in Season 3, and Season 3 just didn't really reach the same highs as Season 1 and 2 did. So I found myself kind of seeing Season 3 as like definitely my least favorite season, and like, is this show kind of like past its prime? Like, could it have just stopped at Season 1 maybe? So then Season 4, I wasn't super excited for Season 4, but then once I was getting back into the groove of watching Season 3 and just kind of, you know, reading about stuff and hearing that Season 4 is really dark and mature, I'm like, okay, I mean, that's what I want. I want the show to do that. So all right, let's watch Season 4. And now that I finished Season 4, I can say that it kind of still continues the same trend of these seasons just can't be consistent. Season 1 is the only consistently good season, but Season 4 has the new highest highs of the show and still pretty lows. I think maybe Season 3 had lower lows than Season 4, but it's a big gradient, but I think Season 4 might be my favorite season. I feel like after I finish this video, I might actually be able to really decide for myself if it is my favorite season, because I enjoy stuff about it more than Season 1, but it's not as consistent of a ride, hence the title of this video. So let's now dive in and begin with one thing that I found great about Season 4. Season 4 brought back the horror. Season 1 was the only season of Stranger Things that I actually found kind of scary. I thought that there were scenes in Season 2 and 3 that were pretty thrilling and exciting, and definitely like kind of dark and twisted, but nothing ever actually scared me and made me a little afraid. And Season 1 had a little bit of that, especially just that very first scene when Will was taken to the Upside Down. That I remembered, like opening the season with that. I was like, ooh, okay, this is like a spooky show. And of course, that was probably the spookiest the show ever was. There was still a handful of other scenes throughout Season 1 that I found like spooky and like, okay, that's kind of creepy. Season 4 brought that back. I really like Vecna as a villain. Everything that he does when he shows up, he provides all of these trippy, like a mind-twisting horror vision nightmares, a la Freddy Krueger. You know, he's also just like a slasher in general, the way he's killing these teenagers and killing them in horrific ways, and that really builds up this scary atmosphere where before, you know, Season 1 was a genuine mystery because we didn't know what the Upside Down was. Season 2 and 3 were still mysteries, but the characters and and we, the audience, kind of already understood where the threat was coming from, so it was still something kind of familiar. I think the show has done a good job of each season kind of changing what the threat is and how it's established and how the characters fight it. But then season 4, I really like it because we have a name to the Upside Down now, and we see the consequences of what he is doing. Like, we are seeing these teenagers get killed, and the characters witness it, and people are scarred from it, and just things are darker because of that. And that also just makes the threat feel more real. Now that we're in season 4, it's like it's time to really kick things up, you know, because I'm pretty sure season 5 will be the final season, and season 4 definitely felt like a penultimate season. So because of that, it was really important to bring back the horror and really bring back the roots of the original season and really just dive into that horror territory, because I think that they haven't quite given it the full punch that they can. And season 4 definitely stepped that up, and I really like that. The tone of this show is very unfocused. Season 1 was the only season that I think had a consistent tone throughout it. Now, Stranger Things has always had sort of a fun, adventurous tone to it. It's never just been horror, and it doesn't need to be. But I think the comedy especially has really gotten off the rails every season. It just gets worse and worse. With season 4, we have 3 distinct storylines, and eventually it kind of becomes like 4 because 11 splits off. So there's a lot of storylines going on, and certain storylines definitely just aren't horror focused whatsoever. Everything happening with Will and Mike and all of that crew, you know, off on their road adventure, like there's really nothing scary going on there, and it's like, okay, that's fine. Like, I guess not every storyline needs to be scary, but when we're cutting from Vecna killing someone horrifically and it's really depressing to then Argyle spitting, you know, random stoner things, or how after surviving an intense shootout where they just witness people die right in front of them, that then they go to this house and, oh, the family's silly. Here's a little kid shooting a little arrow at Mike. Oh, haha, it's silly, right? And it's like, or Yuri being revealed to be this actual villain, which was kind of cool, but then he's just like a weird wacko, and he is just like literally every time he's on screen, he just has to say something ridiculous. He can't just stay consistent of like, here's my motivation, I'm just gonna do it. Like, he just has to be eccentric, and that's the big thing, where so many characters just have to be eccentric, have to be silly and wacky and goofy, and a lot of times the camera angles are zooming in and out, ooh, wacky, and I just get really tired of it. And I think when you're dealing with actual genuine horror and some really dramatic moments, that then all of this silly goofy stuff just doesn't fit. Like, you can have multiple genres and go from comedy to drama and, you know, really play with the audience's emotions, but especially once you're gearing up towards the end of the season and things are really dire and dramatic, when you're cutting to silly goofy stuff, it just takes me out of that. It takes me out of the drama, of the reality of what's going on. Certain character arcs this season I thought were handled very well. First up, Max. I have never been the biggest fan of Max because she didn't really have much character. Max didn't have much to do other than her relationship with Billy. Like, that was kind of it. But then season 4, they did a complete turnaround, and they had her dealing with legitimate PTSD from what she endured and being very depressed throughout the season and just, you know, splitting off from the rest of the group. And that's also kind of cool, the way they handle these kids growing up, where a lot of times the characters are growing apart, because that does happen in real life. And the way they handled Max, I thought, was really well done. And I also think the actress did a really good job of playing that character very real, where it's a tough balance. If you have a character who's very depressed and sad and mopey, it's hard to not just make that one note, you know, and give her more context and kind of flesh it out better, where it's not just, oh, she's sad. It's like, no, I get it, but at the same time, she's still trying. She's still trying to like live her life and still talk to people and stuff. And then they handled it amazingly when she realizes that, uh-oh, I'm next on Vecna's list. That was great. That entire conflict was amazing, led up to my favorite scene of the whole show, with her escaping inside her mind with the song playing. All of that was really well done, and I think the big reason that scene works so well is because not only was it a scary external conflict of, oh god, Max might die, she has to fight Vecna and escape, and her friends have to save her, but it was an internal conflict in herself, because did she actually want to survive? She hasn't really been living throughout the season, so it's actually believable she might be okay with this. And it was her fighting Vecna, not just, ripping the thing out of his throat and actually running away, but also running back to her friends, realizing her friends are there, which is something that she had forgotten. And there's so much going on there that it's so well done. And I wish that they had carried that for the rest of the season, because then she kind of takes a backseat for the rest of the season, which will come into play with one of the frustrations I had with the season. But then they had a nice payoff at the end with her kind of fighting back against Vecna and finally coming to terms, what has been bothering her so much, which is a very complicated, dark thought, which is I kind of wish I had switched places with my brother. I kind of am happy that he died, and that's why I stood there and did nothing, but now I wish I had died instead of him. And it's interesting because she uses that to lure Vecna out, but the subtext of it is that she kind of does feel that way, and that's very important. And then just a quick wrap up of other character arcs. I love Steve. Everyone loves Steve. I think he has had one of the best character arcs throughout the whole show, and season 4 is great to finally see him just embracing being a hero and really understanding who he is and what he would like to become, because he's felt kind of lost throughout the seasons. Now it's like, all right, this is my place. And I honestly think like he is the closest the show has to a hero other than 11. And 11 is a hero, but she's often split off from the rest of the characters. And also Steve just provides a great new hero, a redeemed hero, not just like, okay, we always knew 11 would be the main hero to fight against, the threat, but Steve has been a surprise one. So I really think they could embrace that and kind of give him like a Jon Snow vibe, where he steps up and suddenly becomes the hero that he's needed to be in the final season. I think that would be really cool. The cast is too big. Not only are there too many stories going on, but they just keep adding characters, and the byproduct of the cast being too big is it's hard for us to keep track, it's hard for us to keep caring, and the writers can't keep up. There are many characters that just get thrown to the wayside. I don't know what the show's deal is with Mike. He was clearly like the main character of season 1, and ever since then he is not. And what's worse is he doesn't have much character. Like, all his character is I love 11, and that's it. He's kind of immature, he's kind of silly. He apparently was the leader of the group in a way, which was season 1. He kind of felt like the leader of the group, but he hasn't been the leader since then. And like when Will shows him the painting and says like, there's you leading us, like, well, Mike hasn't done that since season 1, so I'm not really believing that. I'm not agreeing with you on that. That's been annoying. Will has also just had a troubled relationship with the show. The actor for him is great. He can do amazing stuff, especially season 2. He was doing a lot, and we've never really gotten to experience normal Will until season 3, but then season 3, they didn't give him anything to do. He was just there to, I feel the goosebumps, he's coming. And then season 4 is just help out Mike with 11 problems. That's it. And just deal with the frustration of I'm gay and I'm attracted to my friend and he doesn't realize it and I can't really tell him and this sucks. And, okay, that's good, but it's all way hidden in the background, and that's not enough. That's not enough of an arc for a character like Will. Will was really set up as this big important character, so then just to kind of throw him off to the side, it just feels very unfocused. Not only do characters get kind of pushed to the side, but also they get painfully simplified to just fit the role that they're supposed to be instead of being the character that you set up. Robin, one of my favorite characters set up in season 3. She was great. She was an awesome character where right away you understood that, okay, she's kind of quirky and different and she knows it, but at the same time she's very smart, she's very passionate and a quick thinker, and she just goes for it. Like, she embraces who she is, and maybe a small part of her is ashamed of that, not only just because she's a lesbian, but also that she's just kind of different and a little misunderstood and kind of anxious, but she ended up proving to be so helpful to the crew, solving this mystery. She was vital to defeating the Russians, but she also allowed our characters like Steve to really grow and understand different people and understand, it's okay to be friends with someone who's not popular, and it's okay to not be popular anymore, and also that there's just more important things in life, and now Steve has just a great friendship with her. She provided a lot to the cast. Season 4, she just got reduced to a bumbling, nervous mess. That was it. Like, all of that fun, different stuff about her in season 3 just felt like it was thrown away, and I was really bummed out about that. And that'll happen. If you have so many characters, you can't make every single character three-dimensional, multi-dimensional, super complicated characters with big, grand story arcs. Sometimes you just gotta simplify it. But when you simplify it for a character that previously was a much more important, dynamic character, it's a letdown. And Robin was the biggest example of that this season. This one is a surprise because a lot of times when you set up these really intriguing mysteries, and especially with horror where we're afraid of this thing because we don't understand it, when you actually dive into it and you get the answers to these questions you've had, they're not satisfying and they kind of ruin the fear. But I think the show's done a pretty good job, and season 4 especially decided to finally dive into the upside down, the character of Vecna, just all of that. What exactly is going on? What was Brenner doing? How did 11 come to be where she is and all that? And it was really fun exploring that, exploring her past through these memories that she's reliving now. The huge backstory of Victor Creel, which then tied into Vecna, who is the ultimate villain, and how he created the Mind Flayer, and just exploring the upside down and all the different ways it messes with people, and how this, other dimension will now bleed into our world, and how, season 5 will combine it. Like, it was all really well done and really intriguing. And it was also cool to have the characters in the upside down again, like running around and learning different things about it, like how you can climb through the portal, but like everything becomes legitimately upside down, and how it's stuck in 1983 because that's when it was like formed, so then they can go back and find certain items that were there in the past. That was really cool. You can communicate with each other with the lights and stuff, and you can sort of hear the voices. Like, there's all kinds of really cool sci-fi trippy stuff like that where I'm like, okay, this is fun. I like exploring this. And I think they also did a really good job of tying this new lore into what was introduced into season 1, where we're finally getting things coming full circle and it all makes sense, which then also gives new context for the earlier seasons. When you're watching them, you can kind of imagine Vecna making all of those little decisions, and you're like, oh, what? That's when that was introduced, and oh, that was super subtle. I didn't even notice that until another season. And that's always great when you're watching a TV show and a future season gives you answers that you didn't realize you had questions for, and now when you're rewatching the show, it's a whole new experience. This one's a big one. I really have a problem with the show allowing the plot, and by extension the writers, just dictating what happens to the characters and what the characters suddenly know and can do. A lot of this comes down to just plot armor and empty threats, where, for example, Joyce and Murray going on a plane crash. It literally crashes in the middle of the snow, and of course they're perfectly fine. Nothing happened, even though in real life that is not how it would work. Even rewinding back to that, suddenly Murray just remembers he knows how to do karate, which is like, what? That makes no sense. Okay, you suddenly have the confidence to do it, and then they play off that scene in a really ridiculous comedic way that I don't like. Or you got the huge shootout at Joyce's house where these teenagers are witnessing people get gunned down in front of them, and then the agent literally dies right in front of them, and then a couple scenes later everything's normal and they're joking around, and it's just like, we need to keep this tension going. If you're going to show me something that's crazy and these characters would have no idea how to react to it, don't have everything become normal so quickly and be able to be on this fun adventure, because then the threats feel empty, and I can just kind of see the pieces of the plot just kicking into gear where it's like, well, of course the characters can't stop here, or of course the characters have to survive this because they have to be over here now. Or even just obvious things where they're building up to this big moment of, oh no, the Demogorgon's on Hopper, oh, is he gonna die? And no, he's not gonna die, of course he's not. And then, oh, Joyce is suddenly there and saves him, and bada bing bada boom. It's a lot of stuff like that happens in this season, and it just takes me out of it, where I become very aware that I am watching a TV show. I'm watching something that was scripted out, because characters have to be here and do this. This actually can't happen, even though it should happen, because characters have to be over here now and do this. Or how Steve and Nancy and Robin get stuck on the wall in the finale, and they're trapped by these vines that apparently are strangling them. Maybe, I'm not sure. If they're not strangling them, I don't know why they wouldn't be, but they're keeping them stuck to the wall for what felt like half of the episode, which was 2.5 hours long. So that's a long time, and they were just there because they couldn't get any further. They had to get stuck, and then they get released once the characters are allowed to be released, and then they can go finish their job. And it's like, little empty obstacles like that, where it's like a character has to endure an obstacle because realistically they would get to here way too quickly, so I just throw something in there. And I can just see right through it. I can see the blueprint, and the job of writers in any kind of movie or show is that everything is a blueprint, but you got to trick the audience into feeling that it's real and that they're hypnotized into the experience. Also, Yuri having a sudden change of heart, which was so obviously set up, where it's like, you need to get him to make this helicopter work, and it's like, all right, Yuri has no reason to ever change his mind. And then Dimitri gives this sudden speech about how you once were great and you were fought in a war or whatever, and you were actually you were loyal, and what happens to you now? You're not going to be loyal. And then of course Yuri goes and then changes his mind, and everything's normal, and it's like, I can just tell that was going to happen, but it still is dumb. This one I'm really impressed with the show because each season the scale has grown and the thrills have gotten higher in each of my videos, and season 4 did a great job of things feeling epic, even from the first episode with that whole basketball sequence that then led to rolling the dice. Like, the show has really shown how it can build this grand scale epic thrilling climaxes to things that necessarily aren't even, you know, that big of a deal, like winning a D&D game. But the way they juggle all these different storylines and cutting to different things and having these grand slow motion moments and the music, just the way it's all put together and edited, it feels big and epic, and that's really well done. And by extension, the actors are doing a great job of selling it. There were so many emotional scenes in the finale, and they wouldn't have worked nearly as well if these young actors weren't able to sell them. Scenes like Lucas crying over Max, Dustin crying over Eddie, Eleven crying with Lucas. These young actors, a lot of them have really grown into legitimate, professional, great, you know, caliber actors, and I'm really impressed with that. And that's pretty tricky to do because sometimes you can get an actor when they're a kid and it's like, okay, they're cute and they're nice and they kind of work, but then when they become an adult and maybe they kind of don't want to do acting anymore and they're kind of tired of it and they're not practicing as much or whatever, or they just kind of lose that cute charm that they had when they were younger. For the most part, I think a lot of these characters still work to this day, and that's a testament to the actors and the writing. And I'm also really excited to see in the final season how all of it pays off, where all these characters finally end up. This is the most annoying, frustrating thing about the show, and I think it's the best way to summarize it. Stranger Things has a lack of nuance. Everything is spelled out for you completely. It feels like a kid's show at times, the way they need to tell you how to feel, tell you what the character arc was, or what the plot is, and how they're gonna do this. Everything is there, nothing is left up to the imagination or open for interpretation, and I really am not a fan of that. It's one thing if you want to make a kid's show. I can't sit here and argue that Ed, Edd n Eddy is the greatest written show ever. You know, I really enjoyed it as a kid, but I'm sure plenty of people watch it now and think it's dumb, and part of that is just because it's a kid's show. Some kids' shows work very well. The early seasons of SpongeBob, I could still watch those and get a lot of enjoyment out of them. The later seasons, not at all, because it's a dumb kids show. Avatar: The Last Airbender is probably the most famous example of a kids show that adults legitimately really enjoy, and that a lot of us who grew up with it still say, like, actually no, like, that kids show was really mature and was really well handled. And Stranger Things, that was so it's still going. Season 1 did not have a problem with it. Season 1 had a lot of subtleties and a lot of nuance and allowed you to just interpret things the way they were. They had characters be kind of complicated and believable. I always liked Jonathan's character in that season, where on one hand he is just doing his best to save his brother and take care of his crazy mom, but at the same time he has a crush on this girl who's dating this popular guy who's kind of a bully, kind of a jerk, and you know, then he takes photos of her and it's kind of creepy and it's like, oh, you messed up, but then he gets punished for it and Steve breaks his camera and stuff, and then Jonathan kind of slowly earns back her forgiveness, and then by the end he doesn't get the girl because that would be too easy, right? That would be too fairy tale happy ending. Instead it's, okay, we're friends now, and Steve the bully ended up being not too bad of a guy by the end and just kind of more misunderstood and ran with the wrong crowd. And that's a lot of complexities that are going on where the show's not telling you love Jonathan, hate Steve. Like, maybe we all felt that initially, but if we rewatch the show we kind of see, like, actually there's, you know, different sides to the story. But there's nothing left up to that when you get to seasons 3 and 4 of Stranger Things. Everything is so obviously spelled out for you. The whole arc with Jason and Lucas, that was really pointless and led to nothing very complicated or interesting, because Jason, who we spent so much time with him, and every scene he's in, he is either giving a big speech to everyone or he's angry and saying, we have to do this, we have to go find her. And it's like, that's all your character is, and that's really annoying. I understand that a character can have a really strong goal and be really passionate about it, but you got to give us something a little different every now and then to flesh them out as a character. It's just one note the entire way through, and then the payoff of what he was going to do leads back to my whole problem with I can tell that the writers put characters here for this reason. He was just there to stop Max from getting away, and then she can die. And then Lucas literally says his character arc for us, where he just tells Jason, I once wanted to be like you and be popular, but now I realize that being popular is not that important. And it's like, That's a very basic elementary school way of saying it, but cool. And then they have a fight, and then Lucas somehow wins, even though he shouldn't, and then they kill off Jason to get him out of the way. That was all his character was. And it's like, why do we spend so much time with that character if you weren't going to give him anything else? And then with the lack of nuance, it also ties into the previous issue that I have where threats aren't, followed through upon. Hopper going through all these terrible, torturous situations in the prison, he breaks his foot and all of that. Realistically, he would not be able to survive a lot of the things that he did. He would not be able to do push-ups and walk normally and fight people after doing that horrible thing to his foot. But they wanted his foot to look really messed up because it's gross and it gets a reaction out of you. But then that believability, it leaves my brain once I'm like, okay, you just showed me that, but it's only powerful if then it has consequences in the story. If something horrible happens to this character, it needs to stick with them. Otherwise, it was just an empty thing thrown in there for shock value. And now moving on to the 4 opportunities that I present to Stranger Things in the hopes that these things are implemented into the show in order to course correct it and finish the series off strong. Bring the focus in on just a few characters. Season 1 did a good job of having characters that were main characters and characters that were side characters. And since then, the show has kind of stretched it until we don't really have a main character anymore. And then if we do have a main character, they're missing for several episodes or they're not part of the main story. And it's like, where's the focus? Reduce the cast, reduce the stories, bring the focus in. I think 11 is the main character of the show. Focus on her. You haven't done a good job of keeping Mike the main character, so I don't really know what you can do with that. I think Will has potential of being a much more important character. He's got a lot going on with him, so give him the importance. He physically has importance to the story because he can tell with the goosebumps whenever the Mind Flayer is around, and that can be really helpful with 11. That'd be kind of cool to see them together. I think Steve would absolutely function very well as a heroic character who kind of leads these crew on and probably sacrifices himself for the greater good, because we all know that he was made into the show to die, so he'll probably die in the final season. But if you really set him as this very important character and you give him a lot of that time and focus and really flesh his character arc out, so that way when he dies, it's not just, oh no, Steve died. Instead, it's like, whoa, that was this big epic finale to this character who grew to be this huge important character. And also this way you have these certain characters that maybe you don't know much to do with them and they're kind of like, okay, they're not technically this important, then allow them to be side characters. You don't need to give so many scenes focusing on them and their differences. And if they have little minor arcs, then keep it minor. Keep it where we're only cutting to them every now and then, or their arcs are just naturally flowing with the story and the major characters, instead of these minor characters having their own separate arcs, where like, yeah, sure, these characters can be together physically solving the same problem, but if they're each pairing off into their own little thing, then they're not together. And that can also be confusing, where we're cutting to this other scene and it's like, but these characters aren't that important. Let's focus back to here. And so that's one way to do it. This can help with a lot of my frustrations. Keep it grounded, really. Don't oversell what's happening to the characters. Keep it realistic and believable. Remove the crazy action cliches. I don't want planes crashing suddenly and characters being fine. I don't need all of that. My favorite scenes of the show usually just involve personal character moments that don't require these grand set pieces and, millions of dollars of CGI to pull off. Like, now, sometimes just give it a little character moment. And that way you don't need to fight so hard to have these grand epic threats and violence and big epic sacrifices. Instead, because we're in this grounded reality, small moments can feel a lot larger because of that. If you have a big one-shot shootout where everything's crazy, then allow that to be the big set piece that characters are talking about, because it legitimately was a big set piece. Or if you're going to end an episode on a cliffhanger where one of our favorite characters might die, don't then start the next episode with them getting saved and then they are perfectly fine the rest of the season, because then that cliffhanger was just manipulating the audience. There was no payoff. It's the number one rule of screenwriting: show don't tell. You don't need to spell everything out for your audience. Trust your audience, know that they are smarter than you think they are, and give more subtext to your scenes. You don't need everything to be out in the open. A lot of times you can have the surface level understanding of a scene, and then you can have the subtextual understanding of the scene, where then you reward viewers for rewatching the show, because then they're realizing something new about it. And instead of characters saying everything and saying how they feel, unlike how they would in real life, or giving these long, big emotional speeches that are just totally far-fetched. Sometimes reaction shots are the best. I love the shot of Jonathan watching Will spill out his feelings to Mike in a sort of underground way, and the look on Jonathan's face says it all. He doesn't have to say to Will, I understand you're gay and I understand you're different and I am sorry and I will be a better brother for you. Even though he kind of does say that in the finale, once again, undercutting the power of that look. But then still, that look said all of that. A painting is worth 1,000 words. It's a true statement. Focus on those reaction shots and trust your actors because they can sell it. And I think that really will help pay off a lot of these scenes and also reduce the runtime because, oh boy, did the runtime get really long this season. A lot of it was because we had really long speeches. Sometimes just a small look is all you need. It's the final season, so you really got to nail it this time. Hawkins is in hell now. So I've read an article saying that they're not going to do this, and I hope they follow through on it. No more normal life. No more, oh, they're just kids going to school. It's not possible now. It undercuts the threat of what's going on, and then it's like, oh, okay, if we were so scared for Hawkins to become the upside down Hawkins, then when it actually happened, the characters aren't that upset about it, you know? So follow through on those threats. If a character gets really hurt, then they are hurt the rest of the time because then that scene was a bigger deal. And keep Vecna scary. I'm not sure what the threat will be in season 5. I'm assuming it'll still be Vecna because he is the ultimate villain, but every season they've sort of changed the way the threat is. I almost could see season 5 being like a zombie apocalypse genre of the horror because it is apocalypse basically. And that can be really fun and scary, but keep Vecna scary. Keep him this big intimidating force, and with that, he's got to kill some people. He's really got to mess things up for our heroes because so far he hasn't actually done a whole lot, and that's not good. If you want us to really be afraid of your ultimate villain, he has to do some messed up stuff so that way we stay afraid of him. And those are my overall thoughts for season 4 of Stranger Things. I would say this season is probably my favorite. I still don't really know, actually, but you know, it's a lot to talk about, and I like that the show is course correcting some of its problems that it's had in past seasons. I am afraid that it's going to keep making the same mistakes. I'm hoping though that because this is a final season and it is Hell in Hawkins now, that the comedy, silly, goofy bits just are going to be way more toned down, and we're going to finally have some payoffs and threats that happen that follow through and consequences to the dangers that are being presented for our characters. And it'll also be nice to have all of our characters back in one place for the most part, and hopefully with that they can kind of just choose like, all right, we will just focus in on these important characters now. Comment below what are your thoughts on season 4 and Stranger Things as a whole, and if you agree or disagree with my points. I'm sure there will be plenty of disagreements. I know that a lot of people really love the show, and I never want to make any of these videos trashing your favorite thing or saying that you are wrong for enjoying this thing. I am a very hypercritical film person. I expect a lot from something, especially when something like Stranger Things is so huge and famous, and I've seen the potential that it has back in season 1. That's where I get frustrated in future seasons, and I just figured I would voice my overall thoughts of the season and try and be fair and say what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it and my hopes for it. Also comment below what else you would like me to talk about, anything new horror related that's coming out soon. I can always do a video like this because it's fun to do a deep dive of something that just came out because that's the best time to talk about it. And thank you very much for watching this video. Please share this video and all the other How Scary videos, this whole channel, to people. I'm really hoping to grow this channel into something big in the horror community because I love talking about horror, and I also make horror films, so it's just nice to basically do research while making videos and having fun with it. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.